Hello and welcome to Alfie Ordinary's Living Legends, the show where we get to know some of the most celebrated drag performers of past, present and future. I'm your host, Alfie Ordinary, and I'll be sitting down with UK drag royalty to talk big gigs, big wigs and what it really means to be a living legend. And speaking of living legends, she is the host and producer of Brighton Pride's prestigious Legends Cabaret tent, the Golden Handbags and many more of Brighton's iconic drag events. And she is one of the most renowned performers on the UK drag scene. Today I am joined by none other than Lola Lasagne. Hello Lola, how are you?
Hello Alfie, I'm very well, thank you very much.
Oh God, you look incredible. This is very stunning. You know, everyone's managed to turn up looking at, you know, just a part of this lovely house.
Well, if you're going to do something, do it properly, is what I say.
Absolutely. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Plodding along like everybody at the moment with a smile on my face.
Plodding in these
and
heels?
A song in my heart. I know it's first time since October as well.
Oh, God. Oh. So you've been doing drag for over 30 years?
Yeah, 30 years was in 2019, so it's 32 minus a year's rest for the entire world.
A year's rest,
yeah.
I think we should start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. I'm trying to wink at the camera, it's not working. But,
okay.
Tell me about how it started.
Well, dinosaurs ruled the earth and this young cave, but no. I lived in London. I lived in South London. I worked behind the bar at the Two Brewers in Clapham, and I was given drag every day of the week, basically, because it was one of the leading drag pubs in London, still is.
Yes, it is.
As well. So, yeah, I got to see it all from behind the bar, and a little light bulb went off in my head, I think, thinking, I can do that.
Oh my gosh.
I can do that.
Who were you watching at the time?
Oh, Lord. Lily Savage, because this is when Lily was on the scene and ruling the scene as well. Maisie Trollet, who was partnered with Jimmy Trollet as the Trollets. They were a live act every Wednesday. They had a residency there as after residencies across London in various venues. Adrella, Regina Fong, Kerry Dupree, Dave Lynn, Phil Starr, Dockyard Doris, the list is endless. Everybody who was anybody worked there. But then in those days, London had 4 quarters of, you know, they had a gay scene in every 4 quarters. So north, south, east, west, not like it is now. And there was plenty of places for you to travel and show off your thing.
So you were working at the Two Brewers and watching and absorbing it all?
Definitely, because they were all cracking entertainers and all great. There was a mix of live and a mix of lip sync. And yeah, it was a very enjoyable way to spend the evening, serving the punters and getting a show for free at the same time.
When was the moment when you stepped out from behind the bar donning your first heel? I say heel as I'm holding up my 1-incher just here. But
It was in 1987 because Halloween fell on a Saturday that night, so all the bar staff dressed up as would normally happen.
That's a big moment,
in the venue. So I was a witch and I was stereotyped for life, I believe. That was
You've not taken off the hat yet, have
you? Yeah, that was the first time I wore drag officially, and then in that thing, and then I worked out that I wanted to be on the stage and I wanted to entertain, and so I did some amateur nights because they were all around the UK at those times. You know, there was venues open 7 nights a week, so they had to fill the evenings with something on. There were strippers on in those days, vocalists, which you don't get now, drag artists, and there would be amateur nights. So I did some of those, and then the first official gig, first paid gig, money in my tiny little hand, was Wednesday, 7th of June 1989 at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern.
The Royal Vauxhall Tavern.
You may touch me.
So you didn't fancy being a stripper then? No?
Funnily enough, no. No, I didn't. But I was young and pretty in those days, so there was always moments for me to take off my clothes, but that's a different show.
Oh my gosh. So was there anyone else that was inspiring at the time, maybe someone on television or musicians or...?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to be a drag queen because I firmly believe that nobody does. I wanted to be an entertainer, but I worked out that doing it in drag was the way I could entertain. You know, there are dancers, there are jugglers, there are fire eaters, there are drag queens. It just depends where you find your niche. And I think for me that was, I knew I was going to be on a stage and I knew I'd have an audience in front of me. So I thought, well, this is my place to perform. And it just happened that I did it in drag. And I didn't plan, certainly didn't plan back in those days that 32 years later, I'd still be doing it. I was fortunate enough to be half decent as a lip sync act, and then I evolved as I went along. We all learnt from each other, and you just learnt the hard way of being plonked on a stage with a spotlight, if you were lucky, in front of you, and an audience, and you grew your comedy teeth and your drag teeth from that, definitely.
So you've been doing it 30 years. You said it's not a thing that people wake up and choose to do,
no,
but you're still here doing it. What would you say is the secret to a long, healthy and happy career in drag?
Well, I think to anything, just if you have a degree of talent, and somewhere, well, somewhere I do, it seems, because people are still willing to book me. So I still enjoy it, and obviously, you know, it's something that I've always enjoyed doing and want to carry on doing. And then if there's chances to branch out in other directions with drag, with Lola, then I can. But yeah, I mean, with anything, the better you are at it, the longer you can carry it on.
Okay. So how have you seen, over the last 30 years, have you seen the UK drag scene change?
Yeah, because when I started, I was a lip sync act. I always did an opening lip sync number, and then I did some patter. I picked up the mic and I talked to the audience. I always thought it was important to connect with your audience, say hello to them, find out anything you could. In those days, my very first gig, I recycled some jokes that I'd heard from an act the week before, or a friend had told me, and so I had something to say. And then you just saw how long you could get away with it. But I had a lip sync show, a 40-minute show, whatever it was, in those days to do. It was just a part of it. And then as I went along, I then started thinking, well, I want to sing now. And so once I got the courage to do that, that evolved from there. And I was having singing lessons way back in the time anyway. And yeah, it sort of all grew from there. So the huge amount of lip sync artists that were around at the time, because that's very much what the UK scene was like. There was a really good split of live and lip sync, and the lip sync disappeared somewhat for live to continue. And it was that some acts were very good singers and just wanted to, you know, and would sing and would really know how to deliver a tune, and some people wanted to talk as well. And you had all different acts, very different spectrums of acts. Lily, Adrella, Regina, 3 acts who were all superb, but all came at it from very different directions in what they did on stage.
Yeah, they were at the top of their game, weren't they?
Yeah, totally. And then you had Maisie and Dave Lynn and Phil Starr. Phil Starr, for example, was a comedian, stand-up. He would stand there in a dress and a wig, and he would look fantastic, and he would just tell you jokes, but he'd tell you jokes about 2 penguins walking down the road. And you'd be drawn into this mad world of silliness and escapism. And nobody could tell a gag like Phil. He was the master of his art. So there was that, and then you'd get a very glamorous drag queen would come on and would sing a song and would chat and make you feel at home, etc. So that you know, you get 2 different acts. As it's gone on, because audiences have changed, and that's an important thing. And so more interaction coming from that, because you're trying to keep an audience engaged more than you were then, because in those days, audiences would come out because they knew there was a show on. They wouldn't come in going, oh, is there a show on? Nowadays, you'd have your captive audiences who know exactly that there was drag on or a vocalist or whatever, and they were there for the duration. And then that would stop and they'd dance and cruise or whatever. But nowadays, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself, you'll go to some venues where you really have to work hard. You know, harder than you did at the gig the previous night to get the audience's attention. So that's where the interaction comes in. Some people like it, some people don't.
So you said lip sync was a big thing back then, and obviously with RuPaul's Drag Race, lip sync seems to be making a big comeback as such. Where do you think it went? Do you think maybe it's because there are a lot less queer spaces than there were possibly in the early 90s?
Yeah, that's certainly a factor. I mean, again, American drag is very different to UK drag, because American drag is all about the look, and then once you've achieved that look, you've then got to do something. And you know, there's so many people just say, oh, I look fabulous. You do, but what do you do, love? That's the thing. That's the truth. It is. We look fantastic, and we'd walk onto a stage and they go, you look fantastic. You've now got 59 minutes to entertain us. What are you going to do? It doesn't matter what you're wearing. So with American drag, there was more emphasis, I think, on the look and the aesthetic in that respect, and they studied drag and fashion more than UK drag did, because we were about, or we are about, entertaining. And where the trollettes were born because they did not look like women. They were called the trollettes for a reason. Maisie Trolette and Jimmy Trolette wore charity shop dresses and ratty old wigs on their head and great big pantomime dame makeup, but they were entertainers and they were top of the tree. So that's who we looked up to. We didn't look up to somebody who was polished and nails and pads and everything. That wasn't what it was about. We had to be as good as that act. Well,
I think there are two big differences between British drag and American drag. In America, the drag shows, you've got tipping culture, which is where the drag queen will walk around and they earn their fee from being tipped, and they also have the pageant
why some of them
system.
are poor.
But they look very expensive.
They do, and that's where their money goes, and that's why they can't eat, and that's how they can fit into those gowns. And they're all bitches.
But, you know, we've got the tipping culture, which obviously invokes, you know, I've seen some American acts come over to the UK in the early days when Drag Race was around, and they've gone out doing a number, and they've looked around and been like, oh, no one's handing me money.
See, it's strange because there are some venues where, you know, the audience would throw money at you, but it was normally coins. And that's if you were doing badly. So
threepence, did you call it back
I made £61.50 once, so that was good.
My God. And obviously the competitive pageant scene. Were there many competitions when you started drag?
No, not pageant competitions. No. Because see, it's quite a bizarre thing for me because we live in a culture where we tell everybody that it doesn't matter what you look like, it's who you are. And yet drag is or American drag is so much about what you look like. And if you look like, Pearl, for example, from season 906 of whatever it was, then apparently you're brilliant. And if you look like somebody else, then you're not, you know, jiggly caliente before the dental work, then you're not as good. but that's the bit I don't get, because we're encouraged not to target people for their appearance, for body shaming, fat shaming, and such. Everybody can look beautiful, but drag in America tends to be, that I've seen, more on the look, which I find a very, very complicated problem sometimes.
It's complex, isn't it? So what do you think about the way that Drag Race potentially has changed the scene? Obviously, you said you started off wanting to be an entertainer.
Yeah.
We've now got people that their only experience of drag is through Drag Race, which is a competitive reality TV show.
Totally.
What do you think that entails for the future of drag?
I still put it down to, if you've got talent, you'll be booked, because there are the girls on Drag Race, UK and America, who are very talented and they're working all the time. And then the ones that go off third week in, and we can hardly remember their names from previous seasons, they might still be working or doing whatever they do. I still think it's down to talent. I think now that, and there's nothing wrong in having competitions. We had amateur drag competitions back in the day, and you just put yourself, you know, a little outfit together, and you did a number, maybe 2 numbers or something like that. And that's what you did. There's nothing wrong in that at all.
Were they competitive? Like, I mean, by competitive, obviously, there's a prize, but that doesn't make it
the prize was that the prize was you probably got 50 quid and then a booking at the venue. That was your prize. There weren't cash tips and things like that. And again, you know, Drag Race on the TV that we see is a competition. It's a TV competition, and
it portrays a higher level of competitiveness.
I think so, and I like it in some ways, and I like what they're asked to do. And you know, we've both sat there and seen a queen appear on the runway, and we've gone, wow, that's great. And then we both sat there and gone, wow, really?
Rough.
No. And I'm not going to mention any names there whatsoever. But that happens. It is a competition. And, you know, queens with experience go on that. It doesn't mean to say they're going to win.
Absolutely.
So, then you get thrown to the lions after that. And, you know, the girls, the poor girls in season 2 of UK Drag Race have done the show. They've crowned their winner. It was a great lineup of girls, and they've got nowhere to go at the minute because of our pandemic. So, hopefully once they go out and start, you know, strutting the stages and showing what they've got, which is going to be more than 12 weeks on the TV, then it will be great. And there's a place for everybody. There's audiences for everybody, and there's queens for everybody.
You said throwing to the lions. I assume you're talking about social media. I know that I get most of my gigs through Facebook and Instagram, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, I got most of my gigs because I was good. Again, I can't
That's a
hammer
word
that
of
enough.
mouth.
It is, word of mouth. That's it. If you were good, you got a gig.
Yeah.
And then the queens would be talking about you because there wasn't social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram to go on. So people would be talking about you, and then a venue would say, oh, you know, we'd like to book you. We've heard you've gone very well at this venue, maybe in the same town or city. Or the same area, and then it would work from that, and it would expand from that. There were certain places in the UK that I didn't do for ages. Manchester never really had a drag scene for years.
And Manchester's got a huge drag scene now.
It is, but then also didn't have many cabaret venues like for the working acts to to travel around. But now, I suppose a lot through Drag Race as well. I mean, Manchester's drag queens are a force to be reckoned with.
I think we have some of the best drag queens in the UK living in Manchester.
Totally. And, you know, they are good. They look fantastic. And a lot of them are very, very talented.
Absolutely.
I've seen them on stage and they can really work.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I got my gigs from just doing what I did. People liked it and then it sort of spread that way. And, again, I can't. Now you have, you know, you use social media because it's a go-to thing. But once you airbrush something and touch it up and all that kind of thing, and then you book said act to your venue, and you go, sorry, and you look at the photo and you go, oh, okay, because they don't look the same.
I guess
sometimes.
that wasn't you were booked on recommendation from other people from audiences.
We'd have a publicity shot taken, so we'd all go to a guy in London or a guy in Brighton or wherever, and you'd have your shot and you'd send it around. There's still the old publicity shots of me floating around somewhere.
That's one of my favourite things about drag, when you look at the post and you go, that's an old picture.
Oh, too right, too right. You used to look at vocalists and she used to go, that was 5 kids ago, and such drag queens, that was 2 chins ago. Yeah, so totally.
So with the backdrop of Section 28 and the AIDS crisis, it's pretty safe to say that the gay scene was fairly underground when you were starting.
Totally.
Yeah? In 1989, 20 million people watched the first gay kiss on a UK soap opera, which was EastEnders.
It was indeed.
Quiz question.
It was Colin and Barry.
Well done, you are correct.
I know.
So, with such
I watched it.
With such little representation in the media, how vital was the gay scene in you finding people that you connected with?
Oh, extremely vital. And the LGBT scene is still vital today because you don't get entire representation, despite the fact we're in 2021, of every aspect of it. Every letter of the gay alphabet is not represented on television, is not represented in the media, and people are still trying to shut the old letters down, never mind the new letters that are emerging. So for us, or for me, when I discovered the gay scene, it really was like an Aladdin's cave. You walk through the doors, you know, some venues, the Vauxhall Tavern, for example, because it's just a brick building with no windows, you walk through those doors and it was like being in an Aladdin's cave, this wonderland, people that you could connect with, people yourself. You saw men kissing, women kissing, you saw trans people, you saw drag queens. Everything was there in front of you, and we had to hide away because we were not welcome anywhere else. TV suddenly found itself this backbone. Certain dramas, certain writers, directors were thinking, we're not representing properly on the television through our work. We want to write these things. We want to show that these things happen. And something like EastEnders, this was supposedly a true depiction of family life, wherever it might be. This was just set in the East End, as Coronation Street was before. And Coronation Street wasn't at that time doing what EastEnders did. And then EastEnders set the bar. This was so important, but we were very, very hidden, but we found everything we needed there. There were magazines to tell us where we could get help if we needed to, because there was going to be nothing on the TV. There were going to be no helpline adverts for people who were struggling with their sexuality. You know, the first adverts we ever saw were during the AIDS crisis, where we were told, you know, don't die of ignorance, and big pictures of gravestones appearing because it was all our fault. So yeah, it was very important to us to bond, to connect, to look after each other, to look out for each other. Yeah. And all the venues in those days were behind closed doors. There were no windows that you see now because we couldn't run the risk of being seen to be ourselves. Venues were never going to get the insurance, we're never going to get the protection. That grew as things came along. And thankfully, through television, it gave us the courage to come out to more, to Pride's got bigger, comedians did bigger stages, those things there, and people were asking questions, and TV companies and directors and writers were brave enough to make those decisions, and that is very, very important.
Do you think that helped the gay rights movement?
I think so. I mean, Lily going mainstream, I think, was wonderful. I know a lot of the gay scene weren't pleased. They thought she'd sold out the scene, but you know, if you're given the choice of working the London Palladium or working the Whip It in Chipping Norton, you're going to choose the London Palladium every single time. That was the point. And Lily had a good manager, Brendan Murphy, who said, right, Lily needs to be seen everywhere else now. And it worked. And Paul O'Grady is still working. And such is the beauty of it. But yes, I really do think it did. And not just Lily, but any representation of any queer life, but particularly, you know, through drag, through whatever, was a very positive thing to do. And so we must praise all those people who had the balls to go and do that.
And speaking of television, you've dipped your toe in a little bit.
A little bit.
You were a contestant on the Drag Queen special of The Weakest Link.
I was on the first one, which no one's seen.
Ooh!
No one remembers that. It was because it was done at 10:30 in the morning, and the BBC had done 5 specials. The Weakest Link was their big programme.
Yeah.
And it was up against Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which wasn't prime time at that time. I think it was still 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because they were rivals.
Yeah. What year was this?
2000, 2001, something like that. And they were rivals, and they did 5 specials at the Weakest Link, and they did a drag queen special, because 9 drag queens up against the Queen of Mean. It was going to be good, sparks would fly. 10:30 in the morning, they were lucky they got any of us out of bed, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. She'd come back from Los Angeles the day before. She was jet lagged. When she comes on set, she does not speak to you. She comes on set, we're all ready. We posed for the photo, and then we didn't realise until a minute in we were actually playing the bloody game. We just go for it, and that's why it worked. And it was a good show, but the other ones were better because they suddenly got a studio audience for the second one, and they put Phil Starr on the second one as well. It was perfect, and Anne asked him to tell a joke, and he did, and they had to stop because everyone was laughing, including Anne. She doesn't do that.
She does not crack. No.
So yeah, I did that. Did the first drag queen special. I was also on the Big Breakfast on Channel 4.
You were. You were the soap queen, weren't you?
Please. I was on a quiz show on some cable TV thing years ago, and the guys working on that remembered me and remembered that I like soaps and television. And when they were thinking up new ideas of the Big Breakfast after Johnny Vaughan and Denise Van Outen had left, that's one of the ones they came up with. And I was employed for 4 months, January to April. And yeah, I reviewed the soaps, although they didn't give me, it's not like Sharon Marshall on This Morning at the moment. She gets preview clips, she writes for the bloody things. Yeah. I didn't get any of that. I had to read it out of weekend magazine programmes to see what was coming up and just wing it.
And it was live, wasn't it?
It was live TV.
Fully live?
It was live TV, yes, fully live. And so I'd get this script and they'd say 7 minutes and it would be 2.5 because everything else had overrun and such. But I was just on there doing it. I didn't think anything of it. It was just
a job?
Yeah, it was. It was just a job. It was an opportunity to do something. I just happened to be the soap queen. That was the gag. That was the gag, soap queen. But it was good because I reviewed EastEnders when Lisa shot Phil Mitchell.
That's Spoilers. My favourite storyline. Oh yeah.
Just in case no one's seen it yet, they've not got to it yet on UK Drama. But yeah, I reviewed that. So yeah, it was a good thing to do, and I met C-3PO from Star Wars, and I'm an enormous science fiction geek under this, and I queued up.
Isn't that the robot? The gold robot.
The C-3PO. Gold robot, C-3PO.
I'm sorry, I'm not very.
Wow. Yes, C-3PO. But when I was 12, I queued up at a Comic-Con thing to get his autograph. And then suddenly, 20 years later, I'm stood in the garden at 7:30 in the morning while they're culling badgers or something in the corner. I don't know what they were doing. And we got a cup of tea and we're just chatting about Star Wars, me and Anthony Daniels. So, yeah, it was great. That was cracking.
And you met a newly formed boy band, Blue, didn't you?
I did.
How were they?
They were young. They were young, and it was at Backs Against the Wall. Things
oh God!
Yeah, but you know, it was the year 2000, and they were 17, 18 years old, and they didn't know who they were. Especially if somebody like Duncan James, who's now a gay man. Yes. At 7:30 in the morning, I think anybody would scare anybody, but. you know, hey, that was then.
So we can't talk about British drag without talking about pantomime.
No.
You've done your fair share of panto, haven't you?
I have. I've been very, very lucky. And again, this all boils down to talent. It does. Not every drag queen thinks they can do a panto. You can't, and you'll be told in no uncertain times by a casting director, you are not right. Just because you wear drag doesn't mean that you're a panto dame. You have to be an actor. And again, this comes from entertaining, wanting to entertain, wanting what you want to do. And some people will go to panto and think, never again. It is hard work.
Yeah,
it is really hard work. But it is the most enjoyable experience ever. I've done 6 pantos, 6 professional pantos, and I've just had the best time for children coming to the theatre for the very first time. Sometimes, depending what panto you're in, you'll get a headliner that will attract a lot of the audience in. There'll be an extra energy for that. And if you're surrounded by a cast of panto veterans who know their craft, and it is a craft, you've got to know it, the gags, the timing is ridiculous to make the silliest things work. And also and then to deliver a ballad, to convey that love between Aladdin and Jasmine, or Prince Charming and Cinderella. You've got to take the audience from daftness, where there's custard pies being thrown in the face, to a tender moment, because you've got to tell a story as well. And you must never, ever skip the story, because they all know. The kids know. The kids want to see the glass slipper, and the kids want to see a beanstalk, and the kids want to see Aladdin's cave. You don't give them that, then they're not going to be invested in the panto. So it is a craft, and I was very, very lucky to be able to do those.
I saw the panto at the London Palladium a few years ago with Julian Clary, Dawn French.
Oh, Snow White.
And you have Snow White, and what you were saying about not forgetting the story, I was there maybe a good half an hour, forgot that Snow White was anything to do with it.
There was no story.
Absolutely amazed. Julian Clary, one, the outfits were incredible. Like I think I counted maybe 30 seconds between one and another.
Oh, yeah.
And there was just hundreds of them, and they were each as incredible as the other ones.
See, this is your other conundrum. Okay, I saw Julian Clary's very first panto, which was at the Theatre Royal in Brighton, and he played Dandini in Cinderella. And Julian Clary very famously got kicked off live TV for a couple of years for making a joke about Norman Lamont and fisting and Hampstead Heath. And he was persona gratis anywhere within television. And then Pantos snapped him up. Julian Clary is filthy. We know how his mind works. He is out gay, and he is a star of panto. And everybody loves him. And you've seen the Palladium pantos, they do forget the plot, but when you've got the variety show that they put on at the Palladium, you get why. But I've seen him in a number of occasions, and the fact that he is one of our UK stars of panto, despite apparently who he is and what he represents, means nothing.
Kicked off television for being too gay and vulgar, straight into kids' theatre.
Yes, indeed.
So you produce the Legends Cabaret tent at Brighton Pride each year, indeed. And you bring the creme de la creme of UK drag to Brighton.
Which is French for evaporated milk. Yes.
Tell us more about that.
I moved to Brighton in 1998, but I've been working in Brighton beforehand, and my very first Brighton Pride was 1997. We've grown so much. But the Cabaret tent's always been there, and we have so many great acts here. So it's a chance for them to show off. And again, you know, you put an act like Maisie or myself anyway on the main stage to do our act. We're not going to get the crowd on a main stage, but in the Cabaret tent, which is enclosed
there is
as
something
well.
so electric about it.
It is totally. It's like being in a venue. We got the open slots for air to come through and such, and for people to come in and out. But we can see everybody in the tent. They can see us. They can hear us. Jokes land, songs land, etc. So yeah, it really does work, and I'm very proud of being part of Brighton, because they, particularly since 2012, have really grown to include all aspects of the scene across the park and across the city, and of course the money that they raise for charity now, with ring fencing £1 from each ticket for the Rainbow Fund, which is another thing I'm so proud of being part of Brighton. It's something that we do to help every group that fit under every letter. Yeah, I mean, I think Brighton's very, Brighton's unique in terms of their Pride, because the whole city celebrates and comes alive for Pride, which I've not seen in the old days. I mean, you know, the scene was very much gay men and gay women, and then we worked out, or it was worked out, that the bisexuals, transgender, it grew, and then people who wanted to be known as queer, they got the courage to come out. See, that's been the involvement of the gay scene. You know, the bigger that it gets, wherever it is, suddenly somebody will poke their head around the door and stick their toe out and say, hey, I'm here too. And that's been a great thing to watch, and I absolutely adore that so much. And in terms of charity as well, in the 80s and the 90s, we were raising money for HIV and AIDS because we needed to. But then people in Brighton realised that gay men, women, queer people suffered with other things as well. So mental health, you know, just being accepted into a sports group, things like that. They were all targeted, and we raised money for them. And it's a wonderful thing to be part of. It really is. Oh,
you've also produced some pretty big events in drag in Brighton. Yeah. You've produced Maisie Trollette's 80th birthday at the Theatre Royal, and Phil Starr's tribute show. Was that also at the Theatre Royal?
No, that was at the Dome.
At the Dome?
At the Dome, no less. Yeah, Phil Starr passed away in 2005. His last show was Sunday in October at Legends, and he passed away in the night or the following morning. And obviously none of us knew he had a heart attack. He was such a big part of Brighton, he was such a big part of the gay scene. He'd been in drag for over 50 years. Oh, gosh. And we wanted to recognise him. We wanted to say goodbye. There was the funeral, and we wanted to do a show, and Brighton's been very good at raising money for charities and such. And we raised, I think the money was split between an HIV charity, I think it might have been the Beacon, but also a dog's trust, because Phil loved his dogs. Yeah. And we raised over £15,000, I think, that night. And I was asked to do it by James Ledward, who was the editor of G Scene. Yeah. And I was very pleased. I made a lot of mistakes that year, but I learnt stuff from that. And so when it came to doing Maisie's 80th birthday show, we knew we wanted to recognise that. And 7 years ago, Maisie was still working a lot more than she has been in recent years, but just because of her age. And so we wanted to do that. But trying to explain to Maisie, we're throwing a big birthday show for you, but you've got absolutely no control over it whatsoever, and you're not in the first half. It was quite difficult to do. So what we did was we put her in the royal box, we played the royal fanfare, we got everybody on the bill was friends of her and people that she knew. And then she did the second half with Jimmy Trollet, Dave Lynn and Miss Jason, who were the people that she worked with the most closely during her career. If Phil Starr had still been alive, he'd have been part of that as well. So yeah, we did that. But we could have sold those out 2-3 nights on the trot. We just did one night. Yeah, events like that really do show how close our community is and how drag queens are at the forefront of it. That, you know, those two people inspire so many. You know, during the AIDS crisis, the drag queens were the ones shaking the buckets, you know, during the late 80s, early 90s. They were the ones leading the charge to raise money for hospitals, for clinics, for people, for families, because we were going to get no help from the government whatsoever. So that's why they did that. So we were always called on. And there were, you know, it's changed over the year. I do more now than I did when I was a baby queen. So,
well, drag has got a long history of working closely within the community and bringing the community together. For you, what role does drag play in the queer community?
I think it's a vocal point. I think I use the stage as a soapbox as often as I possibly can, and I know some of my sisters think that I shouldn't do that. Some of my sisters think you should just entertain. People don't want to hear that. And there are people out there who do want to hear it. And you can't read an audience when you first go on stage. You read it as you go along. And you work out what you're going to say to that audience. You work out how rowdy your gig is going to be. And you work out whether you can do a beautiful number as a bit of pathos. I also do What Makes a Man, which you've seen me do.
I've seen, it's gorgeous.
Where I take out all of the drag and I change back into my boy self. And I think it's a very important number to do. I can't do it in every venue because it doesn't work for that. But I think when we're on a stage, we should use that during the Pride seasons, during charity. We should use that, and we have the power to communicate to an audience, and we must never forget that. And we must use that, even if it doesn't affect you personally. There are people out there who might hang on your every word, and we get through social media more fans, more interaction with people, etc. So use that to spread good words and good deeds as well as all the camp and the fun too. there's a place for both, definitely.
And what a lovely note to finish on. Thank
we
you.
talked? Is that it?
We've talked.
No.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've been watching Lola Lasagne. I've been Alfie Ordinary. You've been fabulous. I'd like you to stay fabulous. I'd like you to stay safe. I'd like you to love each other, and I'd like you to love yourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Goodbye.